So I'll say I'm Jeff.
Well, I'll start it off. You don't get to say.
Sassy. You've got a thing to do.
That's fine. That's fine. Watch me.
Okay. You do you, man.
Hi, I'm John.
And I'm Jeff.
And this is our second video where we're kind of talking about how the ways that you've been provided for has had a pretty profound effect on the way that you view life and money, and how that may be butting into your spouse or partner and how they do money. And so we're going to take a look at that today a little bit. I want you to think about how it is that when you're a kid, the teachers in your life are predominantly your parents and, of course, your actual teachers from school. And maybe some extended family or siblings.
Siblings, yeah.
They're kind of your main teachers. And as Jeff was saying, man, I'm finally out. I'm finally free. No, you weren't, were you?
Not really.
And I think there's a lot of moments in life where we kind of feel like we're done learning, where we're now going to be, totally running under our own power, and other people aren't going to have expectations on us. And if you're watching this, you're going, yeah, I don't know when that's actually going to happen. And it probably isn't.
No, it's not.
We're always going to have people having expectations, and we're always going to have people teaching us stuff.
Okay, so John, why don't you tell us how people navigate this transition differently?
Well, first of all, the transition to independence, or the attempt to transition to independence, is different. Vastly different, and it's a continuation of what you experienced as a kid and the way your parents provided for you, and it's one of these moments where all the things that you've learned in the past kind of continue. So, for instance, did you have to go it alone? Mm-hmm. Did your parents break your plate for you when you were 18 years old? Did they just say, "Hey, we're done. We've raised you. We don't have any resources to help you from this point forward, and dadgummit, you're an adult, and go figure it out. Go do it."
Yeah.
Maybe you're one of those people who just said, I didn't really have a choice. I went out, I found a job. I didn't have enough money for, rent deposit. So I couch surfed for, 6 months until I had enough to get things going. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have one of those real bootstrap stories. Uh-huh. Maybe you went into the military. And had a totally different experience, and that and you kind of came out of that whole world back into a civilian situation. Each of us has had kind of a different situation on this, and one that might be also totally different is maybe your parents kind of helped you through this transition to becoming independent.
Like how?
I mean, like the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, like
they bought you a house, kind of 9 yards.
Well, it could be bought you a house, or did all the paperwork for you and filled out, co-signed on the apartment, and made sure that your car was in good working order, and took you down to the mall and make sure that you had your opening wardrobe for the first couple of months of work.
Yeah.
Who knows what your story is, but there's something unique and formidable about how you made that very important, impactful transition to your own life versus the life of your parents. Mm-hmm. And now that you're, together as a couple, if you didn't go through that transition together, those were very important experiences that you both had that created some pain, some stress, and maybe some moments where you said, I'm never doing that again, or I'm going to make sure that this happens next time, or I really like this. And all of those things are, again, part of this educational experience that we learn that makes up our normal. Mm-hmm. So also an interesting thing that happens as we're young adults is it becomes the age where we really start to have opinions about the financial decisions that other people make. So, for instance, you might find yourself as a young adult looking at your friends and saying, man, I would never spend that kind of money on a car.
Not just opinions, you also mean judgments.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't believe they let themselves get financially wrecked like that. Or I can't imagine getting in that much credit card debt. Or I can't imagine I got in that much credit card debt. Yeah. But we start looking around at those who are doing things slightly different in our peer group, and we start having an opinion on whether they are doing it right or not. Uh-huh. And that's kind of a big moment. Unfortunately, this is also this part of becoming independent is also a stage where you can start building a thing that we're going to call financial shame. And financial shame is a really potentially debilitating process that we go through in how we see ourselves in relation to money and our finances. And Jeff and I are going to get into that in just a second.
I want to remind everyone that we have a course that's called More Than a Budget. And you can find it on our website, which is relational-media.com. So go check it out. It's like a deep dive into everything money and relationships.
So we want to get into a little bit of this idea of what are we talking about when we say financial shame. And in order to do that, I'm going to let Jeff, from kind of a therapy standpoint, tell us a little bit about what shame actually is and why it can be such a challenge for people.
Shame is the experience one has when one believes that who they are at their core is bad or wrong. So as you might imagine, from a subjective standpoint, that's a pretty intense kind of feeling that you might have. It's one of a few feelings that most people don't tolerate well, even in very small doses, the others being humiliation and embarrassment. And no surprise that sometimes they go together. So shame is this thing where we make a kind of mistake. So let's say you do something wrong, and it's just a mistake, and you have a feeling of guilt about that, right? You understand when you feel guilty that maybe you screwed something up, but you apologize, and hopefully someone forgives you and you move forward.
Right.
You're not thinking who I am as a human being is bad or wrong. That would be in the realm of shame.
Okay.
So why is this so bad? Actually, shame is really debilitating. If you have it in very large doses for extended periods of time, it can really sort of lead to an intense self-hate. And that has implications almost everywhere in your life. It'll seep through your life and kind of suck all the joy and love out of your life.
Can you kind of think of maybe one quick area that you see often where shame kind of takes root?
There's so many. I mean, shame is incredibly common for people, but the one that comes to my mind that's really, really common is about food. Food, weight, and appearance.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So people will say they'll be eating ice cream or whatever they're eating, and they'll think, I'm a bad person because I'm having ice cream, or I'm a bad person because I have a certain weight or a certain appearance. And you know, on the mild side of that, we all go through that sooner or later, right? On the mild side we go, but on the very intense end of that thing, it can be a part of a eating disorder, right? Which could wreck your life for sure.
So if that's what shame is, financial shame is what it makes sense to be. So for instance, maybe, you know, while you were launching on your own, you got into some pretty significant credit card debt. And that could have been due to a bad decision or two, or 12, or it could be the universe conspired against you. You were in a car accident, or you got sick and had to go to the hospital, and all of a sudden you don't have the resources to pay for the things that came up. And I know in society today, there's a lot of pressure about things like your credit report. There's a lot of things about going into relationships with debt. And we're seeing more and more people that don't want to necessarily even talk about their complete financial situation with their partners because they're afraid that they will be viewed, or they will be afraid to take on this idea that I'm the weak link in this relationship because of some things that happened to me. Even if those things, honestly, were self-inflicted. And I think financial shame is difficult not only because it affects how we feel about ourselves, but as you can see, you know, as Jeff talked about in the food story, feeling bad about yourself in this area doesn't fix it.
No, it doesn't.
In some cases, it makes it worse.
Downward spiral. Yep.
So we want to make sure that if you have entered into a place where you're starting to feel bad about where you are financially, and if you're starting to maybe even have those feelings that say, I can't do money, I don't know how to do money, and maybe that makes you frustrated, sad, angry, that these are things that can be addressed. They are things that can be fixed. And the best way to fix them is with somebody. And to be in a relationship where those things can be put on the table and worked out.
Yeah, tell me about that. So you're obviously you're saying a partnership of some sort, spouse or significant other, is the place, the field we work out these issues?
Yeah, so, basically in all partnerships, whether we're talking business partnerships, whether we're talking teammates, whether we're talking marriages, our primary goal is for both of us to be able to advance our cause. And it's not just our individual cause, it's the cause of us as a team or a company or a family. And none of us cross the finish line unless we all do. It's the way it has to work. So I think this idea of your history, your normal, is now coming together with the normal of somebody else. And this time of becoming young adults and becoming independent and then now becoming interdependent, right?
Yeah.
Is a big transition with lots of chaos, lots of change, lots of opportunities. And one of the things that I want to bring home in this idea is this is not a time to just focus on the day-to-day. It's probably one of the most important times to start thinking about our core values.
Core values. Tell us about core values.
Okay. So Jeff, we're gonna talk about core values. Okay. But first, I think one thing that I want to make sure that we touch on is even though you are independent and now working on being interdependent,
sure,
the parents haven't gone anywhere.
Yeah.
And so how you feel individually and as a couple about your parents and how well they prepared you for adulthood is going to have can have a fairly profound impact on you guys as a couple. And so here's kind of a list of things to think about as you think about how did my parents prepare me to be ready to launch. Here's some things that 20-year-olds might say. They might say, number one, hey, my parents didn't do much for me. I was pretty much on my own since I was 12. You might also say that my parents did so much for me that I wasn't prepared for anything
at all.
I didn't learn anything. They just kind of handed me everything, and now I'm out on my own.
They did my homework for me.
They did my homework for me, exactly. Some of you may be on the totally different spectrum and saying, you know what, I'm only in my mid-20s, and already my parents are asking me for help with resources. My parents have always been terrible with money, and I got out of college, and I've got this good job, and here they're saying, hey, we
want some money, huh?
We need some money, we need help. Or, maybe you would say, hey, if I were to get into a financial bind, based on the relationship that I've had with my parents, they would be the last people I would ever ask for help with.
Can't count on them.
Can't count on them, and it would create all kinds of other issues if we did in the first place. And so you pair that up with the other one, which is, my parents have always been there for me. And I don't know that I would want to try to do life without having them involved. And, they want the best for me, and now they want the best for us. And so why wouldn't we let them help us?
Support.
Yeah. So can you imagine these types of normals creating some tension?
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm going to guess that at least one of those things that I put on the list sounds familiar to you. I'm also going to guess that it's not the same one that your spouse would pick.
Yeah, it's totally possible.
I'm also going to guess that the other ones that weren't you sounded uncomfortable.
Or unusual.
Yeah. Exactly. So it is great to have a safety net. But asking for and receiving help from our parents can cause issues, even when they want to. It can create some stress in the relationship if we don't really know what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Jeff, we're talking a lot about the observations that we make of our own upbringing, the upbringing of our spouse, how our parents have been, in the soup with us through this whole thing. And I think those observations kind of create a moment where we want to pick and choose. I really like the way your parents do this thing. Let's do that. But I think really what happens more often than not is I don't like the way that goes. I don't like that. I want to do this. And so I think a lot of times we find ourselves trying to decide who we want to be interdependent, who we want to be as a couple, by a big long list of things that we don't want. And I want to say this really clear. As I said, as we get ready to talk about core values, the idea why core values is so important is because you cannot pick a good financial culture, you can't pick a good family culture by just trying to say all of the things that you don't want to be.
You can't eliminate the bad and expect you're going to
End up
create
with
what
good.
you want. Okay.
Exactly. So let me say it again. It is really difficult to build a healthy family culture through a process of elimination. So let me say this again.
Okay.
It is really difficult to build a healthy family culture through a process of elimination. So this is the time, we'll call it the first 1 to 5 years of marriage.
Okay.
This is the time when it makes the most sense, where it's the easiest, where not everything is so established and so rehearsed that change becomes
not routine yet.
It's not fully routine yet.
Okay.
Where things can be changed easier because the habits aren't quite as ingrained. But this is the moment where you as a couple, and I don't just mean you individually, I mean both of you as individuals working together to decide what it is that you value most. One of the things that we're going to talk about coming forward again is our core values. But the idea is, what do we want to be as a family? What are the things that we're going to pursue as a family that are more important than money? And by identifying those things and elevating those things, we kind of decide who we're going to be. That also helps us decide what we're going to communicate to those that come after.
Stay tuned, because in video 3, we're going to be talking about core values. Going to have a deeper dive into core values. So that's going to be a really good one. And also, if you like our videos, please hit the like button and subscribe, because it helps us grow our channel. So as always, stay curious.